look at safety not as a protection, but safety as a right.
If that is true, then most of our cities are failing.
We have equated safety with security. Security is about policing, surveillance, protecting. We need protection, we need discipline, but we also need freedom.
And freedom looks like what?
Sit in a park and read a book, lie down and rest without having to worry about why am I there.
This is Kalpana Viswanath, urban sociologist and co-founder of Safetipin, whose work has shown why cameras, lights and panic buttons can never replace belonging.
It's not that we're in danger at every moment. It's just that we don't feel free enough to do things.
When cities confuse security with safety, they don't create freedom, they create control. Hi Kalpana, welcome to the Human City podcast. It's such a pleasure to have you here.
Ruchita, it's a pleasure to be here, and I look forward to our conversation today.
Thank you. So Kalpana, you started from sociology, then studying gender and social systems, and today you're working at the intersection of data, mobility and technology. So how did this shift really happen?
So I would say really all these shifts and things that happened in my life, a lot of it was serendipity. I cannot claim that I made this plan. So like you said, I did my sociology, I did my PhD in Delhi. And during that time, I actually started working with Jagori, which is a women's organization, because my PhD was actually about the women's movement. So when I finished my PhD, I actually joined Jagori and I was the director for about 6-7 years. And in that period, I realized that I really enjoyed working on the ground. I enjoyed doing action research rather than a more theoretical research. I think that suited my personality and my skills a lot more. And then we did this work around safety and it sort of just evolved. And honestly, in 2013, when we launched the safety pin, my co-founder is a sort of a technology and educational technology person. And we said, let's take the safety audit and let's make it into an app, because those days apps were really beginning to be a big thing. And so we built the app. At that time, DFID, the UK aid, they actually liked the solution and then they supported us to actually build it out, set up a small organization, and we also got a partnership with Hindustan Times, who then helped popularize it. I didn't have this great ambition or plan that I'm going to reach this or I'm going to do this. I just felt a deep passion to address the issue of violence against women, safety, and cities, because I've always lived in big cities all my life. And I think they have an energy, they have a creativity which has always excited me. So somehow this work just married my passion for cities as well as for addressing violence against women and gender equity. And Safety Pin then grew, and I think that's the story of my journey.
But again, was there any particular moment or incident when you felt that we need to move to safety, we need to talk about it?
So if I look back on my own life, I would say that I think I was aware of gender inequity and inequality very early in my life. I would say even as a 10, 11-year-old. And so I think it is something that's always shaped the way I look at things. And in 2004-5, when we began working on the issue of safety, I think what really drove me was the communities we worked with. There was a lot of work around addressing sexual harassment in the workplace, sexual harassment, of course, violence, domestic violence in the home. But I realized that there's this whole big space that nobody's talking about. Life in a city is also the public space, the street, the mobility, and nobody was talking about how women move. I think it, of course, came from a very personal thing, because I think there's almost no woman in the world who can say, I have never felt unsafe. So when I came to Delhi, I started using public transport. I was using the bus and, I walked, everything. But there's also a sense that one has to look over one's shoulder wherever you are. So therefore, we did that methodology of the safety audit, which is a very powerful tool where as women, we are walking around the city and saying, I feel unsafe here and I feel safer here. Because it's not as if the city is completely unsafe. There are many places I feel comfortable walking around with. For example, even those days we found India Gate, hundreds of women, even at midnight. There's no point making this big pronouncement, Delhi is unsafe. I mean, million women live in Delhi, go to work every day, study every day. I think I felt the need as a researcher and as a woman to begin to unpack this a little bit. And then in 2012, the Nirbhaya case, what happened was it really brought the issue to our living rooms because of the televising. So when that the 2012 case, sort of gave a fillip because suddenly everyone was beginning to accept it as a problem.
Now that is where safety pin basically came as a tool. So, safety pin is trying to generate data. Was it difficult to convince the city governments that you actually need that kind of data, to shape your public spaces safer?
Yes, definitely we need it. Certainly in the first few years in India, it was difficult for a government to say, no, this is not an issue for us. So, to that extent, yes. The recognition that, so what data did we have? We had the NCRB data, which talks about crimes against women. Now, sexual harassment in public spaces is also a very underreported crime because you're walking on the street, someone brushes past you, someone touches you, in the bus, someone makes a comment. Who is going to report this? And where are you going to report it? So we realized that the official data will never capture this because this is a more a sense of a feeling, a perception. I'm walking at night, I feel unsafe. I'm walking in a very crowded place, I know people are brushing against me. It's not accidental, it's a very intentional brushing against me, someone falling on me in the bus. So safety pin idea was, let's get women's voices, let's give a tool in the hands of women to say, I felt unsafe. This place for me was dark. And we came up with the parameters. We looked at a lot of data that had been generated globally because the safety audit tool had been used in Africa, in North America, and Latin America. So we said, what are the key parameters that everybody is talking about? And so we came up with two sets. One was what we call physical infrastructure, that is lighting, the walkability, the nature of the public space. Then we also looked at what we call the social usage. So are there people? Are there eyes on the street? Is there good public transport? The combination of this could relate to what we call the safety score and the perception. So we started producing a lot of data by working with colleges, working with NGOs, going to even low income neighborhoods around the city. So we really generated a lot of data points around the city and interest in. Then we got the city government to be interested because when we said we have 13,000 or 15,000 safety audits for women are saying this and this, they did listen because it was not 50 or 60, it was in numbers. So I think quantitative data, larger numbers always speaks to the government. Though we know that qualitative data can build the nuances around it, but sometimes you also need the big stuff. So I think the one that the Delhi government found easy to address was really the lighting. And the second thing that we managed to work with Delhi government was the last mile connectivity. So areas around bus stops, around metro stations, because we gave a safety score to every bus stop in Delhi in 2014. And then we worked with the transport department around that. So I think even that was a learning curve for us, how to translate the data into ways that are meaningful to women, but also that are actionable by government.
Now, safety pin collects huge amounts of location based data from lighting, transport to visibility. So, were there any common patterns, which really surprised you most?
I want to say on the issue of crowd. So we found deserted places are unsafe because women feel that they may face sexual assault, grave sexual assault. But very crowded places are also unsafe because there's the anonymity of the crowd where someone can just brush past you. You may not be assaulted seriously, but it's other thing. So we realize there's a sort of an in-between space. So it should not be deserted, but it should not be super crowded as well. I think the second one was really the issue of the eyes on the street. I think how do we design our public spaces? How do we keep natural surveillance in a world today when surveillance has become synonymous with safety? I think the safety audit unpacked that and said having police, having CCTV cameras is not what is going to make us feel safer. And I think that to me was very significant that the way we are designing our cities, where we are removing people, where we're removing eyes on the street, that trend was something that I began to recognize was extremely dangerous. And I think we are seeing the ill effects of that in cities across India, where we are removing street life. At the end of the day, what is a city? It is the streets, right? It is not the malls, it's not it's not the shops, but it's the marketplaces, the parks, it's the open street. I think to me was an eye opener. And it becomes a very difficult thing to advocate. It's not like improve the lighting or improve a bus stop. It's much more qualitative, it's abstract, it's human, it's social.
You mentioned about eyes on the street. Now, mostly in Indian cities, that means vendors because mostly our colonies are gated. So, if you have vendors, you feel safe. But In many cities, it happens that politicians or bureaucrats really want to remove them. Sometimes we also want to remove the auto rickshaws and these e-rickshaws from the road. So then how do you really deal it when you're convincing the government on these parts?
And it's not just the government. I think the point you made is there are different interest groups, right? So this is part of the process of gentrification that is taking place in cities across India and the world, where we think that removing a certain class of people makes it better for us. So I think there is a huge caste and class and gender dimension to inequality and exclusion in our cities. For example, very early when we did the safety audits, we found that the idea of safety for the women who live in the neighborhood is very different than for the idea of safety for the domestic worker who comes and works there. But they're both women. We want to make it safe, and RWA will say, oh, let's have a guard, let's do this so that the women who live there. But for the same domestic worker in that space, we don't want to give them a place to sit. We don't let them sit in our parks. So I think it's a much broader issue. And I live in a city of Gurgaon, which is like one of the most inequitable cities in the world. So we have a huge road which has 13 lanes for vehicles but no pavements, no cycle lane. So it is also the cyclist who's moving slower, who's on the street. It is the street vendor. It is the shops on the street. So, for example, our research has shown across in Delhi and Gurgaon, metro stations, areas 500 meters around a metro station is actually a safer place. Why? Because it is well lit. There are auto stands, e-rickshaws, vendors, shops. So it's an interesting model. So I think Indians are segregating out the poor. We don't want to see our service providers. In some ways, we don't even see them as human. So I would say in some ways the government is easier to convince on this because they recognize the poor. And having said that, I think this is a struggle all of us who work in this space of urban design, urban planning are facing today, that how do we build cities that are slower, kinder, and more caring.
Right now you mentioned that in Delhi, from your safety audit, whatever data you collected, and most of the interventions taken were providing lighting in the areas. Now, mostly what it feels is that if you are basically trying to create a space safe, either provide lighting or you provide CCTV. But safety is not just about these two components, it's about providing freedom, access, trust. So, how do you convince the government on those parts?
Okay, so, for example, I will say the free bus scheme has also been an interesting one in Delhi or other cities in India, right? Now, this was an interesting one that came up first in Delhi, but is now there in Telangana, Karnataka, Tamil Nadu. Now, it has actually resulted in more women using the bus. Now, when more women use the bus, more women are in public space. So, one of the problems in many of the northern cities is that they're very male dominated in public spaces. I remember in Delhi, early 2000s, the first all women petrol station came up in Chanakyapuri. That was a big thing. A lot of street vendors are women. We have given recommendations to government about things like toilets for women vendors, sitting spaces, places where they can store their wares so they don't have to carry it every day up and down. So I think lighting is one, but I think even last mile connectivity is another one that governments have responded to. I think that recognition that mobility is important, whether it's for education, for employment, because I think the focus of governments today is on increasing women's labor force participation. And without good, safe mobility, that's not going to happen. Today, the governments are willing to look at if we say that it is going to impact labor force participation. And I think governments are doing more than lighting. So I will say in the past 20 years that I've been in the space of women's safety, I have seen a change in the way things are happening. But is it enough? No. Is it enough to give women independence, freedom? No. And a lot of the changes are still in the big metro cities. You go to tier two cities, there's still a lot of restrictions, there's poor infrastructure. So I think certainly in safety pin, we have very intentionally decided to work in tier two and tier three cities around the country and not only focus on the metro cities.
Now, when it comes to the technology part, what do you think, a kind of a safety technology which is actually effective and what is overrated, or maybe, some examples which you can bring from maybe any global countries?
So I always say technology can only be an enabler. Technology in itself cannot be a solution. But unfortunately, the world is today ruled by technocrats. So they believe technology alone can be a solution. And this, to me, has actually been very detrimental to the women's safety narrative and discourse, because the focus has been, on the one hand, on surveillance cameras, and on the other hand, panic buttons and tracking apps and stuff like that, which is, to me, a very protectionist discourse of women. It is not rooted in a discourse of freedom and independence, as you said, right? It is about protecting women. So you press a button when you're in danger. But the point is, it's not that we're in danger at every moment. It's just that we don't feel free enough to do things. I think it's a very female experience. I think it's something men have to understand. Generalized feeling of unsafety all the time. It's a little bit there every time you step out, like you said, you know. I think it's so deeply ingrained in us. Even if you go to another country, where we think infrastructure is better, you step out of the, London tube at 10 o'clock at night, it's deserted, you will feel unsafe, So today, in the whole surveillance era that we are living in, right? The point is, we have equated safety with security. Security is a different thing. Security is about policing, surveillance, protecting. I'm not saying we don't need that. We need protection, we need this, but we also need freedom. And so I know I have to work and come back at night. It is a calculated risk that I may take. But somehow the protectionist discourse and the way that safety has been posited, it takes away agency from women to take that risk. We should have the right to loiter, walk around, sit in a park. I think some of the interesting things that have happened even in our country and neighborhood. So the Meet to Sleep campaign that men across the cities go and say, let's just sit and lie down in a park and sleep. I mean, you go to any park in winter in Delhi, you see lots of men enjoying the sun and sleep. As a woman, you can't sleep in a park. There's another movement in Pakistan called Girls at Dhabas, where girls went to dhabas and sat. The dhaba is a place you can hang out. It's actually open, so it's safe. So I think the technology does have a role, and I do believe in it. I think it's important. Even AI, we can harness it. It's not that we cannot. But I always maintain that on its own, technology is not a silver bullet. And I think technologists and technocrats need social scientists and the social sector to give inputs on how it is translating into the lives of women, young people, elderly. I think there are many sets of people who are excluded from designing cities, but also designing technology.
Safety pin has also reached globally. So, is there any problem which is similar in all the countries? Which stands out actually.
So, at the similarity level across the world, women feel more insecure in the dark and in deserted spaces than men would. The other thing about women's experience in uh, different countries is the nature of the public space. For example, so say in Colombia, in Bogota, so there's been a lot of work about looking at the work of care. Similarly, in Barcelona, there are these care blocks. So I think where there's been intentional efforts by government, local authorities, by urban local bodies to address it, it has resulted in sort of experiments, innovations which have made a difference. So I think the difference is in the way that it has been addressed. Having said that, I think different cultures are different, right? So a city like Bangkok is not considered an unsafe city for women, even at night. I think it's partly also the nature of the city. There's a lot of street life, street vendors, activity on the street through the day and night, lots of women on the street. But across the world, the fact that women do feel insecure is, I think, something I have yet to meet society.
So, Kalpana, you have named your social tech ventures like yours often face the impact versus revenue dilemma. How did you balance both?
See, it's still a struggle. I think we're still trying to work out that model. How much of it is you're able to access funding which allows you to go deep, and how much of it that you need to go wide and show the larger numbers. And I think this is a struggle in the social sector across this thing. I mean, what is impact? Is it better impact when 100 young women in a city feel confident enough to take up a job, challenge their family and social norms? Or is it more impact when 100,000 women have been skilled? So I actually challenge this idea that numbers only matter. I think this social change takes time. It's not just safety, but it's the whole idea of what should women be allowed to do. So I think the issue of scale is also something I think that is constantly challenged. What is scale? What is sustainable? What is true change? And I don't believe that there are shortcuts. So I think it's a journey that we're still on. We're always learning. Some things are good, some things are successful, some things don't work as well as we think. And I think we have to maintain that humility. And I would like to believe that we're all trying and we're all, in some senses, drops in the ocean. We're all trying. And at some point, there is a momentum that gets created. So I think, especially in the social sector, we must work together because none of us individually can make enough impact. The problem is so big that this is really not one of those things where any of us can change the world alone. Often we take two steps forward and one step back. And I think that's good rather than one step forward and two steps back. So having been in this area of work for more than 30, 35 years, I am more hesitant to claim success ever actually.
When it comes to funders, they of course need numbers. But again, when it comes to the work you are doing, what is one measurable impact you think you have been able to achieve?
The measurable impact to me is, are more women occupying public space? I think that's a simple one. Do they go out more? Do they take more public transport? Are they accessing more opportunities? Are they using public parks? So I think the changes that we're looking at, whether it's lighting, whether it's improving eyes on the street, whether it's improving transport, last mile connectivity, to me, the measure is it impacting the way women navigate cities? Now, it's not an easy impact to do, right? I can measure and say I've improved lighting in 7,000 places in Delhi. Delhi government identified more than 7,000 dark spots, and over a period of 6, 7 years, they've actually worked and fixed all that. And I think it's an impact in the sense that because then government gives it importance. So I think there are levels of impact. One is when government is willing to put their resources to do something that's already an impact, they're accepting this is an important issue. Similarly, if we measure, when we do infrastructural improvements, we do talk to women in that area. We talk to shopkeepers. We ask them, has it changed the nature of the public space? At the end of the day, like you said, when more women are there in public, it's a more it's a safer public space. To me, the measurement is when women are also feel that they have the right to be out. So I always like to say that we have to look at safety not as a protection, but safety as a right. So if you improve the reality on the ground, sometimes these things come together to make opportunities. And so I think I would go back to that meaningful measurement and not easy measurement sometimes. Sometimes we measure what is easier to measure than what should be measured. But yes, I do think you can measure things. The fact that if there are, two, 300,000 women using our app, providing data, that means they are feeling confident enough to use technology, to think their words matter, to think their views matter.
So, are there any new technologies or partnerships you are excited about that could redefine how we think about urban safety?
Yes, actually, there are two things that I think I would like to talk about. So one is a few years ago we launched something called the She Rises framework, which is a framework of looking at gender transformation in cities. So after working for many years on safety and through our safety audits, we also began to realize that for true transformation, we have to go beyond physical infrastructure. We need to look at services, housing, childcare, mobility. So we have come up with this framework with a set of assessment parameters, which we have actually pilot tested in 6 cities with the ministry, and which we're taking to more cities. So I think this is a big one, which we feel that we want to work with cities to help them assess their level of gender in responsiveness, and then give them a kind of a roadmap on how to move forward. The second part is we've been doing this work around cities for youth in Rajasthan specifically over the past 4 years in 4 cities, and we worked with over 10,000 young people, men and men. So in this also we came up with two important things. One is a framework called Live, Move, Grow, Play, which is really what do young people want from cities. And from this we've coming up with a tool called Yara, which is a way of helping young people become fit for the future. So give exactly the words of mobility, independence, dignity. How do we begin to measure some of this? And because we are a tech-based solution, we also recognize the importance of quantifying, measuring, finding parameters. So for young people, we are in the process of sort of piloting this new tool, which is about helping young people getting the skills, confidence, knowledge, and access to opportunities towards building their own agency. Safety still remains a core of our work, but we're also looking at cities for youth and gender transformation in cities as a larger systemic project. And the third thing that we're looking at is rural and peri-urban areas to say how do we make even these spaces and systems and services and institutions more gender responsive. So we're beginning to do some pilots in a few states with partners on how to make women-friendly panchayats, women-friendly rural areas. So I think these are the three areas that we are trying to build our capabilities, work with more partners, and take it forward.
Also, now I guess the last thing, what is that one thing you would like to change overnight, in any city?
The one thing I would like is I think that if women can enjoy leisure in our city, sit in a park and read a book, lie down and rest, sit and think, to me that would be the ideal city. Just the pleasure of sitting in a pub, even on a bench and watching people walk by. There's a sort of sense of calm, a sense of community that I belong here. Like in Delhi even. I remember earlier you could come sit outside in winter. Women would come out, cut vegetables, chat with each other. And there was a sense of care that public space can envelop care also. But if you ask me the one thing, it is to feel uh, happy that I can sit and read a book in a public space without having to worry about why am I there.
Now, what you said is beautiful, but I guess the problem is we are so confined to our surroundings nowadays. Maybe it's because of the pollution or the traffic or working for 10 or 12 hours in a day. But great. Thank you. Thank you so much, Kalpana. What I take away from this conversation is simple. Safety isn't about fear, but it's about freedom. So it's about reimagining cities where every woman, every child, every person feels they belong in, whether it's day or night. So thank you, Kalpana, for reminding us that data and empathy don't stand apart, they build together. So thank you so much.